Well, it looks like some people are finally ready to admit it. The streaming bubble has popped. Streaming isn't, and more importantly, has never really been a profitable model, and it looks like people at Disney Plus especially are finally coming to this realization. Now, Disney Plus is a funny one because it was guaranteed to fall first. It has the least amount of valuable content and rewatchable content, has horrible new content, and most importantly, had the highest production costs. Disney Plus was super expensive to make, and their originals are incredibly expensive to make, and all of this is coming from the developer of Andor, who's come out and said that the reason Andor's been cut from 5 seasons down to 2 is because it's too expensive. The reason why we're not getting more episodes, the reason why several of the episodes were cut in the season so short is because it's too expensive and Disney just doesn't have the money for it. Plain and simply, the money just isn't coming in for these kind of shows, and it's very clear as to why. Disney Plus is spending, I think it said $600 million on the first 2 seasons of Andor, which is a ridiculous amount for 2 seasons of television. As we all know, The Acolyte for 1 season cost $140 million and was very poorly received and was poorly written. And that's been the trend for all of Disney's productions. With only a couple of their productions, like Lilo and Stitch, costing under $100 million and that one going to the box office, it looks like they're finally waking up to the sad truth that streaming just doesn't work. Now, of course, streaming doesn't work for a variety of reasons. First of all, it's the cataloging issue. The catalogs of streaming services are generally subpar, with only really a couple of them having anything worthwhile. Netflix and Hulu might have some things worthwhile, and HBO has a decent catalog, but let's be entirely honest, the kind of things you get from streaming, you can get from a physical media collection. And while sure, Disney has all of its animated classics, I also own every single animated classic in VHS form right there. I spent $30 to get all of them when I could instead be paying $30 a month to get them whenever I might want to watch them, but pay for them when I'm not watching them, or can pay, $1.59 at a thrift store to get them used and cheap. And more importantly, those have no chance of being canceled on me. But of course, movies aren't the only avenue for streaming. What about television shows, streaming originals? Well, with the ones on Disney Plus being 8 episodes a season, each one being released either in full or in drop windows of 3 episodes, you're not getting much churn. So at best, you're only getting 1 month's worth of pay out of a streaming show, which isn't going to do a lot. Sure, you have a lot of people paying, but the other problem is, you don't even know if a show's making you money. Yeah, Andor was a hit, but how much money was being given to Andor? How many people watched Andor and gave money to Disney Plus for watching Andor? Or did they watch Andor because they were already paying for Disney Plus? My parents have a Disney Plus plan through their phone carrier, which means it's a significantly cheaper plan, which means they have no intention of canceling it anytime soon. They looked at canceling it. It's simply not worthwhile to cancel because of how cheap it is. And there are things we watch on Disney Plus just because we have Disney Plus. We wouldn't get Disney Plus to watch that, and in a similar model, most people do that with these shows. The Acolyte, Andor, Echo, all of these shows are being watched only because somebody's already got Disney Plus and they're just looking for something to put on in the background. Which means these shows are bringing in a net $0 for Disney. Disney's making no money off of these episodes. The only time they're making any money off of it is when you're doing an ad-based tier. And problem is, a lot of these people, they don't have ad-based tiers, and they also don't have for the longest time, they didn't even have an option for an ad-based tier. So the only way to make money is if somebody actively has an ad-based tier, then how are you justifying spending $600 million on a streaming show if, for all you know, that show's barely raking any money because nobody's subscribing to Disney Plus just for Andor? And it looks like the creator of Andor and some other people are finally realizing that's the case. So before we go any further, like, subscribe, and let's get into this. Andor showrunner implies Disney has run out of cash, says company told him streaming is dead, written by John F. Trent over at Fandom Pulse. Tony Gilroy, the showrunner for Andor, implied that the Walt Disney Company has run out of funds for its expensive Disney Plus streaming shows. While promoting the show that was originally conceived as a 5-season show and was subsequently cut down to just 2 seasons, Gilroy claimed Lucas executives informed him that streaming is dead. And it is. One of the phenomenal problems with streaming is only so many people are going to buy your product. One of the things that Disney has tried to do is they're trying to get a lot of Indians to join the network because India has such an extremely large population. And how are they doing this? Well, they're charging the equivalent of like $1 for a year subscription to Disney Plus, something so irredeemably cheap. And the problem is, only so many people are willing to join Disney Plus at a price that is worthwhile to the Disney company. So few people are actually willing to subscribe to this channel and for the cost that it's at, that they've literally hit a cap. They cannot go much higher than they're at because no more people are willing to subscribe. IndieWire report that during an appearance at the ATX Television Festival, Gilroy was asked about including the word genocide in the show, and he thought carefully about using it. He responded ultimately yes. When pressed about Vulture's Catherine Van Everdunk, great name, who moderated the panel to elaborate on the decision to include the word, Gilroy replied pretty effortlessly. Now, here's the problem with Andor specifically. It's not really Star Wars. These words don't really belong in a Star Wars production. Now, after being grilled on his use of words like genocide and fascism, which don't belong in the Star Wars universe, he was then asked about the spending, to which he had to say, I mean, for Disney, this $650 million for 24 episodes. I never took a note. We said, fuck the Empire in the first season, and they said, can you please not do that? In season 2, they said, streaming is dead. We don't have the money we had before, so we fought hard about money, but they never cleaned anything up. That freedom comes with responsibilities. Now, here's one of the weird things. You said you have a lot of struggle. You had a lot of budget constraints. One of the ultimate truths about content creation, and including TV shows and movies, is restriction breeds ingenuity. We had shows like Firefly, Buffy, Supernatural, which thrived on incredibly low budgets. I mean, Godzilla Minus one of the greatest movies ever made, had a budget of $15 million. So while I agree that streaming is dead and they're giving you far too much money already, you're also asking for far too much money if you can't find a way to make this show, which doesn't even look all that impressive. If you can't find a way to make that show for cheaper, then you're part of the problem. You're part of the reason streaming is dead, is because you can't make a show worthwhile. And then, of course, 24 episodes. That is such a pitiful existence. It's normal streaming, a normal season pre-streaming with 24 episodes long. You effectively made one season for $650 million. And then you broke that up over the course of like 3 years. It's no wonder that nobody really cares and your numbers are so low. You literally gave them 12 episodes and then you said, we're gonna fuck off for 3 years, come back and give you another 12 episodes over the course of 3 months. And of course, nobody's interested. Arcane had a similar problem where they took 4 years between the first 2 seasons, and then of course nobody came back for the second season, and when they did, they realized it was shit, and there was so much time put in between it that most people didn't bother to come back. Had season 2 come out and been a subpar experience, but came out a year later, people would be a lot more forgiving and a lot more willing to watch that bad season because it came out so close to the original. But instead, you had people have to immediately rewatch season 1, because first of all, season 1's short, and one of the greatest seasons of TV, so they immediately are comparing it. Nobody's gonna bother with your second season when you take so long. In the similar vein of the budget problems, he mentioned that there was a K2 horror episode that had to be cut due to budget constraints. He told Entertainment Weekly, Dan Gilroy wrote an amazing, entirely self-contained episode that was episode 209. It was an amazing episode that was like a horror movie. It was the K2 story. They had to bring this huge, ugly tanker ship to Yavin, and there was a KX unit that was trapped inside the air hunting. It was sort of like a monster movie with K2 on it. It was really cool. While the episode was written, Gilroy revealed why it was never made. We could not afford to do it. It was made clear that it was out of the range, so we had to abandon that and consolidate things. It's kind of strange that this episode is what was cut, given the fact that horror is typically an incredibly cheap production. I'm not really sure what they would have to go in on that with to make it cost so much that they can't put that in on a show that costs $605 million. Most horror movies are made for sub 10 million, as that's why there are so many horror movies being produced constantly. You think you'd better make a Predator-like movie where there's a KX unit hunting K2 and his unit for relatively cheap, far cheaper than the average Andor episode, unless this guy's just so incompetent. He has to stuff it filled to the brim with excessive amounts of practical and special effects. Gilroy would go on to reveal this was not the first time that something was cut due to budget constraints. It's like what we did with the Aldani. Danny got burned twice. Danny wrote that Aldani episode pre-COVID where there were 2,000 people in Aldani. It was like Glastonbury, this huge festival. And then by the time we got there after COVID, they said, well, you'd be happy if you got 150 people there. We were like, oh my god, we have to change the whole story. Everything had to change. You can't just fill in the background with with digital versions, copy and paste the crowd and spread it around. Gilroy would go on to reveal just how much costs were cut. By the time we got to season 2 and Bob Iger came back, everything had changed and everything was belt tightening. It's hard to ask for more money when they're laying people off at Disney, and we were like, wow man, well, we built half an aircraft carrier, we'd like to finish it. You built an aircraft carrier for a show that gets almost no viewership. You built an aircraft carrier for a show that gets very little money. I understand that artistic value flies off the handle the moment you're given a fat check, and you're willing to splurge on anything to make your your vision come true. But have you ever heard of models? Have you ever heard of sound stages? You could create a set that's modular that you can make to look like different areas of an aircraft carrier. I mean, you're wanting to build something for one episode that was used for an entire series. We made as many concessions as we could, but it's still a huge gamble on their part to keep going and still a huge ask, Gilroy said. So thank you, Disney, and thank you, Lucasfilm. It was a lot of tough conversations and a lot of anxiety, but really, in the end, they really backed our play. This is a really weird article and a really weird interview because, well, yes, Disney Plus is dying, its viewership is going down, it's reached the ceiling on subscribers, and people are generally unhappy with it, not to mention the amount of money it owes after being forced to acquire Hulu. Disney Plus is really struggling. But then we also have people like Gilroy here going out and spending ungodly large numbers of money on a show that doesn't deserve it, on a show that doesn't beget that kind of budget, on a show with no tangible income stream, no identifiable way to say how much money is actually coming from that show, and you're out here building an aircraft carrier for it. While Disney Plus is in part to blame because of the fact that they can't manage money at all, you too cannot manage money. You're just going out with the most expensive yet quick way possible. You're not being very pragmatic about this development, so it's not entirely Disney Plus's fault. And with the budget going up, you'd think that we'd at least see some value. Well, from the original launch window of the first season of Andor, we noticed that it was only 6th place in streaming, beaten up by Wednesday, Dead to Me, 1899, The Crown, and Manifest, and then it came to Andor, and then sad thing is, according to Nielsen reports that the show only attracted 821 million minutes watched for the first week of April 28th through May 4th, when the show premiered episodes 4, 5, and 6 of Season 2. That's an average of just 4.7 million viewers. If you divide that total minutes viewed by the 3 episodes runtime, in contrast, the season finale seemingly attracted 11.8 million viewers. So on the Nielsen chart, with less competition, Andor climbed to 3rd place, which is fantastic. But this goes back to the problem I offered early on. How many of these people are watching Andor only because they have Disney Plus versus how many people are paying for Disney Plus to watch Andor? The thing is, the older models of television, where shows were just on and running constantly with ads, and then they could see how many people were tuned in approximately, and that's how much money the studio got, that made more sense. It would make a lot more sense if they were to go back to, the benefits of a linear model of streaming is tenfold. First of all, you get to constantly play ads. You get to target your ads better based on the market that you are actively advertising for. You can have several channels, and one of the biggest benefits of linear streaming, which is just where the show just plays on and on, just a line of shows through different channels, kind of how old TV used to work pre-streaming, was that it prevented things like streaming anxiety. You never had to worry about what am I going to bother watching. It prevented things like having to guess where the value of the shows are coming from. It allows you to know what shows are being watched for how long. It allows for you to allocate the ad resources to those specific shows. And most importantly, allowed for water cooler moments. One of the benefits of a lot of TV shows, and Andor did get a little bit of this, is when you create a show that has a large amount of staying power, you then create a water cooler moment where people get around and they talk about the show. Word of mouth spreads viewership. Andor got a boost because of its word of mouth. It had very good word of mouth, so a lot of people went in and they watched it. But that only carries you so far, especially in a show that only has 12 episodes. Word of mouth is a whole lot less valuable when the show's done running. It doesn't do you nearly as much good if you're not catching the show in its initial launch window. Whereas if you created something that was a 24 episode series that ran on a linear model, you'd have a lot more opportunity for people to watch and discuss the show and allow for it to spread more. The biggest problem here isn't that streaming is dead. It isn't that Disney Plus is dead. It isn't that the model is dead. It's not that TV is dead. It's that you people are a bunch of fucking morons. The people who went headfirst into this role, they looked at Netflix and like, oh my god, Netflix being the first on-demand streaming service, that's a genius idea. We should all do that too. And yeah, Netflix is a genius idea. They did a phenomenal job with it. Problem is, Netflix licensed most of their products, and that's what allowed for them to have the bandwidth to do that. They were paying studios a license, which means that Disney, say, when they gave Netflix Prince and the Frog, Tangled, all those movies, they got a licensing benefit. They were paid money by Netflix for that show to be on Netflix. Netflix had to pay them, and then Netflix got paid by the users. Disney Plus was making more of a profit there because they didn't have to worry about hosting fees, which is the number one thing. They didn't have to worry about advertising their own movies because Netflix was using them as a way to advertise Netflix. There are so many different problems in everybody having their own streaming service, and worst of all, it's not even helping the audience. There was a claim that the reason we'd go to a streaming model was because it would get rid of the cable. You'd cut the cord, you'd get rid of the cable thing entirely, where you're not paying for a million different channels that aren't even on demand. Well, now we're here paying for a million different channels and none of them are linear. None of them are producing content worth watching and, well, people are just going back and watching old content. Countless research into the viewership of especially Gen Zers are finding that most of us are watching 20-year-old shows. All the shows that I've bothered watching in the past couple of years are anywhere from the 80s to the early 2000s. I can't tell you the last time I watched a TV show produced in 2010 on, or lo and behold, 2020. I can't tell you the last 2020 production I watched. And yet I'm the prime demographic that they desire. I'm in the 18 to 24 range. I mean, and yes, streaming is certifiably, objectively, definitively dead. They've killed it. They failed to make it work. They utterly lost the plot. They completely failed in their goal to make streaming the main model. And what ended up happening is we have a couple of successful streaming services. We have Hulu, which is decently successful. We have Netflix, which is incredibly successful. And then we have Paramount Plus, which is oddly successful. I'm not really sure who's subscribing to Paramount because they don't have a lot of content. At best, they have Illumination and Minions. That's pretty much all they have. Max is occasionally profitable, but because Warner Bros. Has some of the worst market position right now, it doesn't really matter whether or not they're profitable. They're already licensing out most of their content. Pretty much everything on HBO Max is currently on Netflix or on Amazon Prime. And of course, Amazon doesn't make any money, but it doesn't have to. Same with Apple Plus. Apple Plus is one of the few successful because the shows it's producing are actually worth watching. Problem is, Apple Plus doesn't make any money because it doesn't have to. Apple Plus is just a way for them to get their kicks while they're busy making cell phones. So if these companies are smart, they'd either go back and they'd resort down to making more linear products. They make 24 episode seasons, and they make something that you come back week and week to make sure that you know, and they know, that it's actually the money's being used for streaming on that show, because there's really nothing to substantiate that right now. Most streaming services are just sitting there. Hell, I guarantee you, if Disney Plus stopped making new content, Disney Plus viewership and subscription counts would be mostly stagnant because people just have it for the rare time that they feel like watching Lion King. So ultimately, because of the fact that it simply doesn't matter, if they were smart, they'd close their streaming services, call it a loss, and start sending their products out to other streaming services again. Allow other streaming services to brunt the cost and also pay them to have it. Or worst of all, they're going to end up dealing with the fact that people like me, Gen Zers a lot, are heavily resorting to getting physical media. I've got 200 VHSs, 200 DVDs, and I plan to get more someday when I have money to buy them. Streaming's dead and they killed themselves and I have no sympathy for them. But that's pretty much what I've got. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this and I will see you guys on the next one.